When the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priest.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Don Priest, and this is Love Conquers Alls. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Donald Sama.
Oh, yes. We've been shogunning.
That's because I've been watching Shogun.
Put
Don
Sama after everything?
Yeah, Don Sama. I'm calling the dogs that now.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Gidget Sama.
Alfie Sama.
Alfie Sama. I'm going to become the Shogun of my house.
It's such an, I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen it out there, and I'm sure a lot of people have, but just, to have to read almost the entire show, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's a commitment.
Because you can't go and you can't be on your phone while you're watching or anything. You have
there's
to
a lot of
actually
head cutting.
watch it.
There's a lot of head cutting.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of me doing this, that. There's a lot of that. Yeah, you can't. It's really. I don't know what's compelled me to finish it, but yeah,
it's a good story.
It's a good story. It is a good story. Yeah. So thank you all for coming and listening to us. Because we know you have a lot of other podcasts to listen to, but we're happy that you're here, and we're happy that we continue to get amazing guests and people that are interesting and have different ways of looking at the subject matter that we talk about every week. And just a quick update on No Country for Old People, where we have just pretty much locked our picture, and we are very, very tired and very proud of ourselves. And who knew that you have to do all this legal stuff for documentaries? No idea. It is brutal. We had to go through every single frame of this 3-hour project and get clearance from what's called a fair use lawyer, so that we don't get sued later on, and that the distribution doesn't get sued. And so we've done our due diligence, and also it's very expensive, so we're still raising money, folks. If you want to get a tax deduction,
Bring it on,
because fair use lawyers are very pricey. Very pricey.
And they know it too. They know it. It's like, I get to write you an email. That'll be $700. Thank you.
I'm not even kidding you. But
it's crazy. But they're really good. They're terrific. So worth every penny, I say.
Worth every penny if they ever listen to this. But we're hoping for a thumbs up this time because it's just getting too expensive. So anywho, that's what we're doing right now, and we're also beginning to create what's called an impact campaign. So this is because, as you know, this is not just a movie; it's a movement. And we want to create a collective conscious shift in the way we think about our third act of life, and the long-term care industry, which is exactly what it is, an industry, and that needs to shift very quickly, because many people are suffering now as we speak, and we are all in this. It's not just other people's problems, it's really all of ours. So it's super important, and we still appreciate everyone's support. And if there's anybody out there that is an expert in creating, a Me Too movement kind of situation, political activism, we're all in. Please contact us, because we make movies. We don't know how to make movements, but we're there for you. We've got this great tool to educate the public, and it will. So help us get it out there, and help us, make changes that are dire. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Let's talk about
Good
show
stuff.
that.
Well done. Well played.
Let's talk about our
now
guest.
we will move on to, we have a fabulous
We have
guest
a great
today.
guest who came to us like through a very, we weren't even searching this, and it just came to us like a gift.
It's a miracle.
Yeah. Tell us about
Shall I tell
her.
you all about her?
Yes.
Okay,
Please
I
do,
will.
Dawn.
Heather Fink came to filmmaking from comedy. She has been making funny videos since she was a kid, growing up in small-town New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah,
That's like
Jersey.
where my mom's from. I love that.
I know. You're going to like her even more now.
Now she's
It's
a Jersey
true.
girl. I love it.
After earning a philosophy degree from Georgetown University, she has gone on to direct over 35 comedy shorts. Heather has been featured on MTV, Dr. Phil, TV Guide magazine, and The Washington Post, just to name a few. And now her real-life story has led to a groundbreaking one-woman show, Quicksand, that chronicles her dad's paralyzing stroke and the struggles to pull herself up from sinking. As Heather says, from caregiving to death and the midlife crisis, Quicksand is a storytelling and clown exploration of the realest shit we face. And we are very excited to hear more about this heartfelt project and everything in the world of the one, the only, Heather Fink. Hello, Heather.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And P.S., I went to George Washington, not Georgetown, although that would have been nice.
Oh, did I say Georgetown?
Well, there are two Georges that are both in D.C.
I
and
know.
they're quite competitive, although the one is Ivy and the one is not. So,
Well, the one that you went to is clearly better because look
yeah.
who you are.
It's got 100% more Washington than Georgetown. Yeah.
so much
Exactly.
more. You're absolutely right. Way more Washington. Yes, it's such a pleasure to be on with you. Clearly the film you're making, can you tell me the title again?
No Country for Old People.
No Country for Old People. I mean, that's beautiful. And the show that I'm making too does have a long-term purpose, not just, making a lot of different parties feel less invisible, from making caregiving less invisible to making elder care less invisible to having female breadwinners be less invisible. All these different things I want to give visibility to. And so I'm quite passionate about what you're saying, and I'd love for this to lead to the ability to change caregiving in the world.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
I care
do it.
about.
I swear,
Yeah.
it really comes from storytelling, and it really comes, I feel like the power that we have as filmmakers and writers and directors, that we can, fashion a story to touch hearts and that will resonate, right? So and I keep telling people that, this problem in long-term care has been around for decades, for 5 decades to be exact. And, and it's not like it's not been talked about, it's been, Frontline and CNN and, and John Oliver and now everybody's talked about it, but it doesn't resonate when it's just facts. So when you tell a story like what you're doing with Quicksand, that's when you reach people, is when you touch their hearts and when it resonates, comedy. Can I just preface before we get into it, because I can't wait to hear all about it, is that this, just wanted to clarify that yes, your dad had a stroke and it wasn't Alzheimer's, but in the long-term care world, there is so much ableism, and the ableism is directed at people with dementia, people with Parkinson's, and people who have had strokes, because often all three of those lose their ability to communicate. And when you don't have a voice, that's when you are so vulnerable. And that's why we're having Heather on, because I want to talk about that and how that she navigated that with her father, because I had that issue with my mom. And I think it is, that is the universal issues, that the ableism, the ageism, and then the vulnerability of not having a voice. So
Yeah.
tell us about you. I mean,
Woo.
first of all, you're great. Obviously, you've done so much. And that's a whole nother podcast. I'd love to talk about what you've done as a filmmaker and a creator. But tell me about how Quicksand came about.
Well, I'm now 42 years old, and I have been trying to make it, and I've gotten very, very close to my big break, like so close, where I had investors in a film and then it fell through, or I was hired to direct these 2 major TV shows, and then there was a merger and then those shows got canceled. So I've been very, very close. And I've written maybe 6 different feature scripts. I've made one that didn't really have, like, that wasn't my big break either. And so I've been struggling to tell my story for so long. And I wrote a feature film based on the things that my family went through. I always, even though I specialize in comedy because that's my favorite instinct, or that's my strongest instinct, my own comedy instinct. But I always want to make things that give like a spoonful of sugar with the medicine. So I always want to deliver a message or something that I care about in every single story I tell. So that's there for everything. But I've struggled for so long to try to figure out how to tell the story of what my family went through. And my first feature script I wrote about it, I think, is the worst script I ever wrote because it lacked objectivity. And so I wrote that in 2019, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell it. So I started developing it for television. And then I know that these things take forever to get made, if at all. And I just said, my dad passed in June, so it'll be about a year. And I was like, I just need to get this out. And so that's why I started doing a solo show. And one big part of the show that speaks to what you mentioned about not being able to speak, and it's something that's depicted in the show that I try to figure out through the television version and the stage version, which is that one of the deepest struggles I've had in my dad's life after the stroke and during his death was that he couldn't talk and there would be no last words, and I've been seeking those I can connect to and identify with on this. And I was like listening to Anderson Cooper's grief podcast, which is fantastic and I recommend. And I'd been participating in death cafes, which if you don't know about them, I also really recommend. But I could connect. It was very rare that anyone could speak to that feeling, that desire, that feeling of being like robbed of last words and all of that. Because it happened in 2010, so he was for 13 years like that. And yeah, I'll stop if I'll keep going if you want, but I thought maybe you were going to say something.
Oh no, go on, carry
okay,
on.
I'll keep going. Okay, so it's called Quicksand because organically I felt during this time that I kept sinking and I kept trying to do something to pull myself up from it. But life and the situation and constant emergencies kept sort of pulling me down. And it's my desire to try to climb back out of that. And I thought for the television version, that there could be this surrealist space where, for example, my character could communicate with some version of her dad and have conversations with her dad. Maybe it's like a puppet or a claymation version or something like that. And so that is actually part of the show. I have made a puppet version of my father. And I do kind of play with that. There's some surreal stuff. Like there's a storytelling sandwich in the show. And in the middle, I do some interesting theatrical themes with caregiving and my dad and my puppet dad. So that happens. But for the TV version, I just want there to be some sort of surrealist space to work through the emotional part of the story and make it something like the whole thing with film and art, right? Is you want to create an emotional response. You want to get to people who maybe have gone through this or even haven't to try to help them understand what it feels like. So that's kind of how I'm using like this quicksand surrealist space. And for the TV version, I liken it a bit to Ally McBeal, how she would like visualize all these like dancing baby and things. So it's not exactly a dream space, but it's more the character can interact with things about how they're feeling inside. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Oh, it's great. It's
Wow.
it's a great device to work through a really hard situation, right? So I think that's really powerful because it is hard because when you're thrown into a situation like that, like my mom was communicating and then due to what happened in 2022, she ran to the hospital, got intubated, and then, anybody, even if you don't have Alzheimer's, your ability to speak after being intubated is impaired. You need, therapy to get back to it. So my mom began to lose her ability to speak, and I wasn't prepared for that either. But we were so close that I had such a nonverbal communication with her. I spent every time I was there, I would do the dog and pony show, the Susie, I'm your daughter, dog and pony show, to keep, to get in, to open the doors. And we communicated, as I'm sure you and your dad, you figured out a way, right? And I literally could make her laugh. I could make her swoon. I could make her throw kisses to me because I would see her look for words. Like she'd look up and I'd go, I know you're looking for the word. You're trying to get it. And I go, I'm here. I got time. Wait. There was one moment, and I'll say this because I had patience, and halfway through before, it was like 6 months of this chapter when she went into the hospital and then died. About 3 months into it, she just looked at me with clarity and just went, I love you. Like that, like fully articulated, like she ran a marathon to get those words out, and never again. They didn't come out again. But it was a gift. Yeah. But, and I feel your pain because I had to go through walking her out the door without hearing how she felt about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really is a deeply hard thing. And I know that there's other people out there going through it, which I think is why you make a podcast. Like I'm making the show, you're making the movie. We do these things to try to connect so that, I mean, the feeling is that you want to make something because for all the suffering or tragedy, you want it to have been worth something, you want to do something with it. So, like I said, there wasn't Alzheimer's in my family, but aside from my dad's stroke, also my grandmother and my dad's older brother was schizophrenic. And so, my grandmother lived with us when I was a teenager. And so I've had a lot of people who aren't all there present in their mind. And you talk about those moments of clarity, I can remember like very rare few moments where you could actually connect and how intense and how you'll always remember those moments for the rest of your life. And so my dad, I think, he had a decent amount of comprehension, although he had a hyper-emotive state where he would either laugh or cry more easily. Like, for example, we tried so hard to still bring him stuff so we could all have a good life. And we took him to the ballet at Lincoln Center once, and he laughed at the ballet dancers, and then he laughed at how inappropriate it was to laugh. And so he laughed so hard we had to like pull him out of the ballet.
Oh my God.
Which is, because to be laughing at ballet, like really good ballet, it was very ridiculous. So we had to pull him out. But those kinds of things that happen. And then more recently, something happened with my mom, where my mom has always been like sharpest mind. She was nicknamed the bulldog at work. And she was recently really, in a really bad way, a victim of romance scammers who came, like they target widows. It's really bad. And even then I felt for the first time in my life, like my mom wasn't with it mentally, like just trying to get through to her. And this is something I've been dealing with this past few months, and it's been fairly devastating. But that thing where your loved one, there's like something where you're not connecting, it hurts. It's really hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
It's a big loss. There are little deaths along the way,
Yeah.
that we have to come to terms with, and so you grieve them as quickly as possible, and then you go to the next new normal, the next new normal, the next new normal.
Yes, it's that next new normal. It's that accepting. Like, for example, I know some people, of course, have both parents will be sick at the same time. And I don't know, I guess I was naive to think I could really compartmentalize, like, okay, when dad passes, we can focus on mom and she can be free from being an intense caregiver again and do all these new things. And then I realized, oh my God, she's so vulnerable and needs help. And I need to think about, maybe I need to move back. My mom's in New Jersey, and maybe I need to move back. Maybe we'll live in the New York City area together. Something like making a plan in that way, all that stuff that I'm recalibrating once again, It's that recalibration, is that feeling of that sinking in quicksand. But if I can be prepared for it, although you usually can't really prepare for these things.
No, you can just prepare for being unprepared is what you can do, right? So you just know that things are going to happen that you're not going to expect. And like, how can you, be resilient to it, and and also acknowledge your own journey, which is difficult. So that's, I think for me, like being always wanting to be strong for my mom, and and coming in with the best face, my dog and pony show, and not wanting to make her feel like she's making me feel sad, because I know she wouldn't like that. So I would try to always be stoic, but you have to honor your own, journey through it, which, and part of, I think, what you're doing, like I wouldn't say that this film, I wouldn't do my film as a way to come to grips with my mother's, the last chapter of her life. That it's too much work and too hard. But on the other hand, it's really for a bigger purpose. But it does help you put it into perspective, and to look at it with, a more objective eye, if you can, as objective as we can be with it, right? But I think that it certainly doesn't, I don't think, make it worse. I think if anything, it helps you, process.
Absolutely. And every step of writing this show has been harder than anything I've ever done before, because even if I've written things that were inspired by my life or reality, it was never about my life. And so you have this like pressure to honor, you have the same thing, like to honor this huge subject you care so much about, and your actual family member, that's a lot of pressure. You're like, oh my God, how do I even put something like this into words? How do I take the stories I've told over and over again about my life to other people in conversation and actually serve it up? How do I summarize and serve it up?
And to maintain their dignity, because you're talking about things that may be, hard when you're talking about, your loved one and how they would feel if they, I mean, obviously he still had his mental capacity, so you waited till it was all done. You hadn't started writing during this, had you? Or maybe you did. I don't know.
I did, because I always had this desire to, like, there's such a deep loneliness in suffering through anything by yourself that you feel people can't relate to. So I always had a desire to depict. I wanted people to understand better. I wanted them to understand better what it's like to really live with a wheelchair, like what the caregiving's like, what the dressing's like, what a stroke actually is, because we didn't know how to spot one. And if I can tell your audience real quick how to spot a stroke: FAST, fast, face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty, time to call 911 immediately. Like, that's the only thing you can do, is get to the hospital to stop the stroke immediately. My mom didn't know he was having a stroke. She thought it was a heart attack. She tried to give him an aspirin, that kind of thing. So we didn't even know that was a direct, I know that maybe other people know this, but high blood pressure stroke. So watch out for that. And also for my dad, he was healthy, very healthy, and aside from this, and it was his sleep apnea that caused his high blood pressure. So snoring can lead to a stroke, and people should know. They should know, because this is devastating what happened.
Yeah, it's something I have, and it's I've heard, you hear it, but yet you think, oh yeah, but that's not gonna
just
happen.
Monitor your blood pressure. Just monitor it.
Yeah, and I do, and I do that, and it's under control right now. So that's a good.
Then you should be okay.
Information.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not like if you snore, you're gonna have a stroke. It's more watch out for your blood pressure if you snore.
I think it's more like if you snore, other people are going to have a stroke, because you're so annoying.
Keeping them because they won't sleep.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, my dad snoring was so crazy, but yeah. So that happened. I mean, it is one of those things where it's like he drank in moderation, he didn't smoke, he did exercise and stuff, and it's still, he got really bad. So that, and there was stress in the there was all this other stuff going on, but either way, that was, to me, you talked about little deaths, like that happened when I was 29 years old, 2010, and that was actually for me harder to deal with, his stroke, than his passing, because I guess it was like the introduction to intense loss, the loss of his physical identity, the way that his role as father with his physical mobility, but more than the physical mobility, it really was him not being able to talk anymore. It's funny the things you think about. Like, I realize there's this like two levels of missing. Like yesterday, I just saw this image of really gorgeous chocolate chip cookies, and I missed my dad's chocolate chip cookies. But those are from before. Like that's from when 14 years ago that he could last make his chocolate chip cookies. So this is an old missing. It's not the dad I had later that was making these. And it's strange how the death has made me reconcile with the old version of my dad and the other, like there's these two versions. I don't know.
I get it. I get it. I talk about, because I became mommy towards the end, and and I really my mom was always my best friend, and I loved her and admired her and just had a ball with her. And but in that last stages, like it was like she was my daughter, and I fell in love with her like a mother would to a child, because I am a mother. And and I missed fiercely what you're talking about in the beginning, because it was a 16-year journey with Alzheimer's. I did have those deaths and missed all those things. But once I, transitioned into mommy with my mom, I missed that mommy. I missed that one that I took care of the most. And because it was she was so pure and so vulnerable. And like doing the documentary and looking at her face that we have to edit all the time. And I always tell Dawn, I miss that face. And that's not her face. It's not the face that I grew up with. It's the face that I helped shepherd. And yeah.
Oh no! So you just made me think of this feeling I had. I'm sure you've had many times you had to go to the hospital over and over again, and you just reminded me of this feeling once of going to the hospital and like looking for my dad's room, because it was like a new thing, so I didn't know where his room was. And like when you like scan through all the rooms and all the beds and all the faces that you don't know, and then you like land on when it's your person, those eyes, like that moment in the hospital where you're like looking at all this sea of strange faces and you like land on your person and they're not strange. And there's like something about that feeling. I don't know. Yeah, the face and what they are. Like, I mean, my dad, that's all he had. He could do yes, no, okay. Mostly everything was said with the word okay. And we did the guessing game, the dog and pony show you mentioned. Like, the guessing game was just such a big part of our life. But he made jokes. I mean, and my favorite joke he used to make is he would like hide behind an object that was obviously too small, like hide behind a coffee mug. Like, and it was so cute because he was using what he had. He was using what he could do. And he would make jokes, and sometimes, I remember the first Father's Day after the stroke, like how much I resented it. Like I was so like upset because it was too much, like the instant movement from my big strong dad to this like someone who was cute or infantile, like this idea of like old person is cute.
Yes.
It was something that was so like I wasn't ready for it. I didn't like it. I didn't like people talking to my dad or looking at my dad or thinking about our parents like cute people as like a dismissive kind of thing. That, I mean, it bugs me about older people in general, how people act like they're just these adorable or fragile or feeble things, and it's like you don't know how badass this person might have been. Like you don't know what like this person could have been an actual gangster. Like you have no idea.
I think about that all the time. My mom was an amazing singer, and I had all of her tracks. So she had a deal at Capitol Records. So I had all these songs from the 60s that she did and what she recorded there, and I would play them because people would just do that, like dehumanize her, and she became just a gray lump, right? And so I would play the music every time I was there, and people would walk by and go, "Who is that singing?" I go, "That's her, the lady in bed. That one, that amazing woman." Because people forget, and and just to backtrack on how I felt about my mom towards the end as my child. infantilizing her. It was more about knowing the stage that she was at and giving her grace to be at that stage, and it's okay, and that I was there for her, and that I wanted to give her dignity, but I had to respect the stage that she was at physically, cognitively, and spiritually, right? So and that is a hard thing to do, because we don't want to, my mom was fierce and was independent and, just a force of nature. And so to see her, I still saw that in her. No one else would have, but I saw it. But I also had to allow her the respect to let her be where she was. And even though I missed that other mom fiercely.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So it's very complicated.
I completely understand that feeling. Like, interestingly, I guess maybe because it was my dad that had the stroke, I felt this immediate thing in my family where I had to buck up and be the dad. Like, I just tried to take care of stuff, and show up in that way. I mean, even in like very literal ways, like my dad loved to garden, did the gardening. And when my dad was in the acute rehab center after the stroke, I went home and my dad had this huge garden in New Jersey, and I like went up to him, like, all right, I'm gonna take care of this thing. I had no idea. I just like looked at it and I was like, okay, I have no idea. I don't know what any of those things are popping up out of the ground. Like, I'm gonna try to fix something else. But I do think that my mom and my sister have sort of said as much that about the role that I have taken, where you parentify, I guess is another term I've heard, where I'm kind of like, okay, how can I step in right now? How can I take care of business and sort things out? And that part of it I can handle, where I'm like, okay, what can I do to help the situation? I can handle that. The harder part is more recently with my mom being romance scammed, and us not being able to get through to her, which we have finally gotten through to her, which is great. But just the thought of, I didn't like signing power of attorney for my dad, but we needed to. I didn't like when we had to do that then, just mentally thinking like the paper acknowledgement of a diminished capacity. But then we explored that for my mom, and that was, to me, like, that's a bridge too far. Like,
Yeah.
I do, like, she's definitely like with it on so many levels. She's not a little old lady. Like, I just hate that. She's vulnerable. She's not her full self that she was, but she is with it in so many ways. And she just needs to grieve not just the loss of my dad, but she really, this happened when she was 60 years old, and she was working in New York City as this like very active businesswoman and loved her life. She loved working and being a part of New York City and all that goes with it. And to grieve that sudden loss, becoming a full-time caregiver. And so she needs to reconcile and work through all that stuff. And I really think she has hope to get herself back, because she doesn't have an actual condition other than being like a truck ran over her heart.
Yeah,
That's really,
of course.
It's a real thing. I mean, that
course.
is.
I mean, there's nothing more devastating. I mean, this is a whole life is like shifted in a flash.
1 second.
It's like, I lost my dad when I was 16, and he died in a plane crash. And it was like, I say, like, I've had experiences of both. So I had my mom, who took 16 years to exit, and my father, who was ripped out of life. That's how it feels like. He was at the top of his career in the music industry and flying a plane back from Mexico City, and it crashed and he died. Just like that. And so there's all different kinds of, losses and for your mom, like the lifestyle is so, it's huge. I mean, that is a death. So all those deaths that happen, right? So your lifestyle, your perception of yourself and how you fit into this world as a wife. So now she's not a wife anymore. All of those things, and then now she's 13 years older.
right.
And I know, like, I'm hitting a stage where I'm going, wow. So Lincoln, you're 90, and it's like, whoa. So 13 years is a long time and now your mom needs to reconcile that. And how does she, she's not going to get those 13 years back. So how does she make the best of what is coming?
Right.
Knowing that is not either, we all are by the grace of God. So I get it what your mom is going through. It's a tremendous amount of loss and responsibility to herself to figure out how to get back on track if possible.
I think it is possible. We just got her knees replaced because her knees were worn out by caregiving, and then I messed up my knees, then helping her. But, I mean, it was a combination of that, and my knees were already worn from working on set because it's physically brutal. But there's like this cycle of, and I just am so thankful though that my mom survived this, because my mom's mother died caregiving for my opa. So we were we had an intervention with her months before my dad passed. Like all of my mom's from Holland, and it was like all her brothers and sisters. And we sat down with her, like, you can't keep going like this. Like, you're gonna burn out. We don't want you to go like you're like Ola. And it was a kind of thing where I wanted my dad to pass, and I wanted him to pass peacefully, because this was just, to me, what my mom was trapped in and what my dad was trapped in was devastating. However, it was interesting that despite how difficult life was, my dad was really fighting to not go. Like, he was really, in his death, the time of his death, you could see him really trying to stay with us, which was a beautiful thing. So I was very in awe of the death process. But yeah, it was amazing.
Well, then you should feel, then that's because of you and your mom. He had something to live for still. Despite everything, he still had something to live for, because you were giving him that life. You were providing him that love and something to hold on to. So I do have a question, because Susie will tell you that when her mom was, first diagnosed, she thought she was going to fix it. She thought she was going to, just by sheer will, she was going to fix this. We're going to conquer this. Was there ever that feeling? Because, I mean, with yours, it's with Alzheimer's, it's a progressive thing. This was like, bam, now. And the doctors, I'm sure, gave you what the prognosis was. Did you ever feel that, no, I'm going to fix this thing?
Oh, yes, we did. For years, we fought so hard, because with strokes, physical, speech, and occupational therapy are 3 therapies you can go through to get certain things back. And there's a certain time window where people can get things back. They can get their speech back. They can get their mobility back. They can get their motor skills back. But with my dad's case, my God, did we fight for it. The things that we did. We tried every kind of therapy. Everyone suggests all these things, and you buy things, and it's expensive, and you try so hard. My mom even tried to let my dad drive again. She put him in the car in an empty parking lot. And she had her hand on the emergency. I mean, we did, all of us, like my mom especially, of course, did not give up fighting. Like, we tried to take him places where it was obviously insane to have a very, partially, but very, a lot of him paralyzed man on an airplane. Airplanes are not very accessible. They just really aren't. And we carted his butt. We took him to France, to Holland, cruise. We tried all this stuff, and all of it every time was devastating, because everything that says it's handicap accessible, most of the time, 75% of the time, it really isn't. Like, oh, you didn't think these steps here, were going to be a problem for the wheelchair? How is it, there's not bars in this bathroom, stuff that seems really basic, or even just, yay, let's try a beach wheelchair. Well, my dad, his digestive system was also partially paralyzed, so he was huge, and he was already 6'1". So you've ever tried pushing a freaking beach wheelchair over the dunes of the Jersey Shore? Oh my God. Just so difficult. All these things that seem so nice. I mean, it was just such a struggle to enjoy things still. But we fought, we tried, and yes, we tried very hard to get things back. This is one other little thing that I always think about was in the parking lot at it was the Kessler Rehab Center in Chester, New Jersey. It was fresh after the stroke, and I said to the nurse something, my dad and I, we'd always I move a lot in New York City, and we'd always build furniture, build IKEA together. do you think he'll ever be able to do that again? And she gave me this look in my eyes like, oh no, never. But she was like, yeah, sure, you never know. It was the no in her eyes, and it was, I probably knew the answer, but I had something about letting go of that because we bonded so much doing
Right.
that I had to let go of it. I had to just ask her. Yeah.
Aw. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. It happens with every, like, you know, I remember the first person that really laid out the truth to me about Alzheimer's was Lisa Gibbons. And Lisa was like, she was a friend of a friend. So this was like 16 years ago. And we went to lunch and she said, I know it doesn't seem like it's going to progress, but it's going to progress. And I know that, you know, you're not going to know it and you're going to turn around and you've lost a whole nother part of her. So, and she was the one that encouraged me to take photos and videos so I don't forget. And, you know, and I remember sitting at lunch thinking, yeah, that's your mom. That's not going to be my mom. My mom's not, it's not going to happen to my mom. Like I just thought it was everyone else's mom or dad, you know, it wasn't going to happen to my mom because it's different. But, you know, then we quickly realized that we are not, you know, Superman and Superwoman, and we're going to have to put on our cape in a different way and, you know, and deal with what we've got. So, wow, you're very raw right now. I feel it.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things you said that, well, the superhero thing, I always say that I think caregivers are the real superheroes of the world, you know, what they bring on put on their backs and their shoulders. And there was something else you said about the recording. There's an actual line in my show about, you know, how what I went through with my dad made me realize I have to record things so I don't lose them. Because I really didn't have, I mean, it was 2010, so like smartphones didn't come till a couple of years after that. So I really didn't have a recording of his voice or talking. Ugh, makes me so mad.
Ugh, I know. Well, my dad too,
Yeah.
because, you know, my dad died
Oh,
so long ago and I was like,
God.
you know, I mean, he was such a technophile and we had, you know, 8 millimeters and stuff like that and, you know, Super 8 or whatever it was at the time. But, you know, I haven't heard my dad's voice since I'm 16. So I miss that so much. And he had one of those, like, you walk into a room and you know he's there kind of guy, you know, and he's like this big, booming, masculine guy with, you know, tons of charisma. And you're just like, I wish I could just hear that voice because it's been so long.
Yeah.
But I feel
I mean,
you.
especially like your mom being a recording artist and your dad having, you know, you have films, but you're filming the wrong thing. Like you're filming this beach, film you, I need you, you know?
I know, I know. There's a quick anecdote. I went to take all my mom's vinyl and had it digitized, and I went to in LA. There's this legendary master who masters from records and or mastered onto records called Bernie Grundman, and it turns out that my father was his mentor. I didn't know that. My father was very big in that industry, and when I was there, they were still using my father's equipment, and so Bernie Grundman happened to be there, and he came to tell me all about my dad, like all these anecdotes and how all, you know, how bigger than life he was, and he was explaining to me because I said it's so odd because I don't understand. Here's my father who invented the conversion from mono to stereo, was one of the top engineers of his day, and I do not understand how the sound gets into the vinyl. Like, I do not understand it. So Bernie was trying to tell me it's just like your eardrum. It's all, you know, pulses, and the pulse goes into the cutter, and the cutter puts those pulses into the vinyl, right? And he said, and at the time when your dad was doing it, and he was teaching me, he said, you know, it's very sensitive. It picks up all sounds. So at that time, you have to be very quiet. Well, he goes, do you ever remember your father being quiet? No. So, and he said there's so many times where he would be talking and it would get into the recording that they were like mastering onto the vinyl. And I said, you have to find those for me because I haven't heard his voice in so long. But I haven't been able to follow up with him and get it. But I know his voice is out there on some vinyl.
Yeah, I hope so.
Room.
That would be such a
it would
like
be
treasure.
amazing. Like it would be like strange, and I don't know. It just would be incredible. But I understand what you're saying. So tell us about your show. Where is it? It's opening in June.
Yes, it's in June at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. So there's 5 shows this June at the Hudson Theaters, which is there. It's on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's also I booked an accessible theater. That was important to me.
Good
And
girl.
yes, um, and the first show, well, the preview is June 8th, and then I believe it's the 15th, the 23rd, the 27th, and the 29th. It's mostly weekends, but there is one Thursday, the 27th. Um, and yeah, so part of Hollywood Fringe, you can look up Quicksand Hollywood. I think if you just Google Quicksand Hollywood Fringe Festival or Quicksand and my name Heather Fink, you'll find a link to buy tickets.
That's great. No, I'm definitely we're definitely going to go and see you.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
are you going to record it? Are
Yeah.
you going to have somebody record it?
I
So you
am
can-
going to record it. I thought about having live stream, but I decided against it because the show is, first of all, so intimate. And I really look at this show as a first run. Like, I want to do it more. I want to bring it to New York. I want to make it even longer because I have a couple musical numbers there was no time for. And this is an hour
Love
show.
it.
So.
I love it.
So I just want to keep developing and doing it more. And this to me feels like a first run, the beginning of
Gotcha.
something. And because it's 5 shows, I really hope to fill those seats. But I know for Fringe, it's normal to do that many shows. I hope to maybe go to the Edinburgh Fringe, which is like the big center of the Fringe Festival next year. Yeah, so I just want to keep developing and doing more and more and hearing from audience, hearing from people who've been through this. Like, do you feel seen in this? What do you want to know more about? I want to hear from people as well. And I hope to make this a television show, and I want to incorporate as much of this world through this, what would be a family, instead of dramedy, I'm calling it a traumedy, as much as I
love
can.
that.
I love it.
Traumedy, that's so great. Traumedy, that's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything as we've been working on the documentary? You know, there's so much. You know, it's obviously about Susie's mom, and there's some moments, and you know that Susie's just like, can you please fast forward through that? And she's had to compartmentalize, and I have too because I was very close with her mom, just so we can get through it and really treat it like it's like, is there certain parts either as you were writing or as you're rehearsing, performing, that consistently hit you, and how do you deal with that? Do you just use it, or do you just say, no, I got to put that aside? And what are, you know, I mean, you don't have to tell me all of them, but
Well,
just
yes,
an example.
yes, absolutely, writing it. And the crazy part too is that there's so much, because I can't have the show be too long. That's not pleasant for the listener or for the audience. So I do have to pick and choose, and I've cut a lot of stories and stories that I feel are essential. And I've really focused it down to what I think are the most important focuses for the show. But as I was writing it, getting it out, gosh, it's such a normal thing as a creative or a writer that when you write anything, you'll beat yourself up. You'll get this self-doubt thing that goes, oh, this isn't good, or this is hard, or it's not coming out right, or what business do I have to say this? You go through all that stuff. So I knew that was familiar when I started facing that. But in this, it was even more like I was procrastinating big time. And it was like, Heather, you have now. Write the scene. Because so much, I mean, if I were to tell you specifics, I'll tell you what I actually tell in the show is stuff that's going to be hard every time. I tell the actual story of his death. I tell it very specifically because I don't think natural death is depicted. I just don't think it's depicted much at all in a real way. You know, murders and bang, bang, you get shot kind of deaths are depicted. So I do tell the story of his death, and I tell the story of his stroke. And I also give a lot of backstory of myself and my family, because part of the concept of Quicksand is how we lose ourselves in these things. So I want to sort of set up, okay, here's who we were, here's who I was. And I want to ask the question of like, am I still that person? We always talk about, you know, as we get older, or I'm not that person anymore, but like what parts of us still really are, always are, or what parts are lost, or what is actually gained, like that we've grown. So I ask a lot of those kind of questions. But I cut out some of my really favorite, super fun stories from my own life too, because I was like, the point of anything I'm going to share about myself has to be the story of my own life's personal goals. So I'm only going to tell you about that stuff. I'm going to cut this other stuff out. And then with my parents and my dad, I sort of did want to set up what was going on in our lives before that. And I want to tell you the story of the stroke, but part of the, okay, so one thing I'll say is sort of do this clown-like demonstration of caregiving, which I think you can imagine could easily lend itself to clowning. You never caregiving for someone. So that's something that I do, because I think rather than tell you all of these specific stories, I will rather take you into the emotional feeling of doing. So I've sort of summarized some of the stories because I'm mindful of the audience. I'm mindful of them getting something out of it instead of just like exhausting them with like, this happened, this happened, this happened. But so because to answer your question about what's been hard to get through, it's so hard talking about yourself and trying to summarize yourself, period. Whether it's the happy moments or the sad moments, and owning up to your own like midlife crisis career failures in the entertainment industry. I mean, that doesn't feel great, but I think it's worthwhile because I know other people connect. I think even super successful people feel like failures in this business because it's designed to make you feel inadequate. It's designed that way.
Well, yeah. I relate to it. Even in the documentary, I knew that we had to establish my relationship with my mom and who I was at before and what my life, like, you know, one of the people in the what was there? It was the
chaplain
from hospice. You know, came in, wrote about me in the notes in the medical records, saying, you know, this poor girl's dedicated her entire life to her mother, and you know, I'm so worried about what'll happen after her, what her life will be like after her mother dies. And I was so offended by that because of her, you know, shallowness to even write something like that. And that my fear was that, is there anybody out there that would think that I was this helicopter daughter? I wasn't a helicopter daughter. I had a life. I have children. I have a career. I dance. I do this, you know, and I wanted to show that I'm a full person. And then I was watching it, you know, in our first cut, and I'm like, oh my God, cut me out. There's too much of me. It's like too much, right? And you know, there is the coming to Jesus kind of like, you know, looking at yourself and going, you know, is that important? How does it support the message we're trying to make? And that is very difficult from, you know, our perspective as writers and creators, and then the people who are, you know, deeply enmeshed in this narrative, you know. So it is quite a challenge, and I understand that, what you're saying, completely, 100%. And it's very delicate. It's a delicate dance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
There is even a moment like of jokes I cut out. I had sort of like a joking moment about my mom. I mentioned the scamming of my mom, and it's too raw for me, and I hate it. I don't want to make fun of it. So sorry, audience, you're not getting that laugh. Like I'm not giving. It's all as personal as it can be what we're doing.
Very personal, and you know, and I do think that, you know, I'll credit Phil Rosenthal. I saw him talk. My friend moderated a talk with him, who was the showrunner of many things, but you know, Everyone Loves Raymond, and he talks about how, you know, universality is in the details. And so, you know, I always remembered that because when I was doing My Mom and the Girl, which was my film about my mom with Alzheimer's, I kept that in mind. It was very much in my forefront, thinking that, you know, oh, is anyone going to relate to this? This is our story. It's so nuanced to our relationship, to our life. And then I remember him saying that you know, that the universality is in the details, and that's how you reach people. So you have to have, and he's right. So you have to have faith in that. And, you know, and we saw that firsthand. Like Dawn and I did the festival circuit with that film, and, you know, it was tremendously successful. And we and besides,
in the edit bay, we're like, is anyone going to care about this? Does this relate to anybody? And we were like, we did not know. You know,
I didn't know. I just had to be truthful and tell the story. And I wanted to make sure that I showed, you know, the traumedy of it. Like you said, I'm totally stealing that now, Heather. I love it so much. I will credit you.
You can license it from her.
I love it. But I had to show the traumedy of it because there was so much comedy. Mom and I related with comedy, you know, and that's what I loved about Valerie Harper, was that she had that lovely balance of heart, empathy, and and the funny bone,
Yeah.
and it was like she was the perfect person to play this role. But I had to lean into that and say that those moments are what will touch people, even if it's not what happened to them. It's the authenticity of it.
I can't wait to see your film. I have to see this. It sounds like you're both. I love that. I have to tell you, this is my favorite interview I've done because it's so rare that you get to connect both on like the caregiving and elder care elements, but also that we're creatives and we're trying to take what has happened to us in our hearts and not just make something of it that's useful, but it's make something that's useful to others, so that they can learn, they can connect. And that is such a beautiful quote about, the universality being in the details. That's always true for comedy. The more specific, like a joke or a detail is, the more someone can laugh, because even if it's not their detail, it can be next to their personal detail.
Totally.
I recognize real. Yeah, authentic. It's real. Like the more specific, the more real. So I would love to see your film. And there is that thing, like when you say something or it's just you there's something that's very isolating about a solo show that's like in my head for so long. Like the first time there's a quicksand fairy that comes into the middle of the show, but there's one other person, and when I ran lines with her for the first time, God, was that satisfying. I was like, oh, thank God. That's probably the more fun part of the show. But yeah, it really does feel like a lot. And there's been moments where it's weird to retell the story of your dad's death in great detail over and over again. That's a weird thing to do,
I get it.
Yes. And it's probably weird, like showing these clips from your life, over and over. I don't think we detach from it though.
We can't detach, but we can compartmentalize. Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Because my biggest fear was my whole life is my mom dying. My whole life. Like, we used to laugh about it. She'd go, well, don't worry about it because we don't die. We're not dying. You and I are not dying. That's the way it goes. We're not going to do it. We joke around about it, and but if anything happens to you, Susie, I'll be jumping in right after you. So don't worry. There was that kind of thing. And when it was coming, and I kept telling the doctors, she's not ready to die. But I said, I'll know because we communicate. I will know when she's done. I know that 100%. And I had to, woman up, for lack of a better term, to be there for my mom and let her know that I was okay with it because she knew what a big baby I was about it. And I wanted to not be the big baby. I wanted to be strong for her and me. And, the last thing I say in the final the voiceover in the film is that you taught me how to live and now you taught me how to die. And I watched her die so beautifully, and I'm glad I'm glad that I was the one, and I'm glad that I took all the tubes out and laid down next to her and cuddled on her and loved on her, and it was one of my favorite moments. It's one of my best memories, and I'm glad I had that time to do that. And so important, and I just felt proud of myself and proud of my mom. For a life well lived, and for her being such a badass, strong girl for the last 6 months. And I told her, you did such a good job. I'm so proud of you.
It's really wild, like how, I love hearing. I mean, hearing you say how much the death was beautiful and meaningful and powerful for you. Like that's what I experienced too, and I do wish people would talk more about that. It was miraculous what I witnessed. So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I loved my mom more than anything. And it was my biggest fear. Like I used to just go, I can't. And I had a guest on about 2 years before on our show, who's still my friend now. And Trish Lobb, and I adore her. And she's very, strong, empathetic woman who was, close to like a death doula and wrote books about it. And she told me on my podcast, before my mom died, I wasn't even thinking of her dying yet. I just said, I don't even like to think about it. It's going to be my hardest thing in the life. She said, it's going to be beautiful. You're going to be strong, and you are going to get through it because I see you. And I had that in the back of my mind the whole time. And if it wasn't for her framing it that way for me, I don't know if I would have been able to view it like that. But I went into it because I really trusted this woman and thought it's going to be what it is. It's going to be as beautiful as a birth is this death.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't know. People who are death doulas, that is such a beautiful thing for anyone listening to know that a death can be beautiful, a non-violent death.
It should be. It should be. It's honor. It's spiritual. It's a transition, and if anything, it should be the most dignified thing that you can go through, if at all possible, because it is your moment, your exit. It should be spectacular. I made the room as beautiful as I could in the hospital. I put, everything I could. I didn't know how to do anything. I just did from my gut, and I just tried to make it as peaceful and loving and warm and safe. And that's all I could do. So now let's go cry, because now I'm feeling very emotional.
I got a little teary-eyed in there.
Yeah, I'm very emotional now. I loved having you on. This was so great. I can't wait to see your show, and I'm wishing you so much success with it. I know you're going to have great success because it's coming from a really good place. It's coming from love. That's what our show's about. Right. It really is.
It is. Do you know why, Susan?
Why? I do, but tell us.
That's because love is powerful. Love is contagious, and love conquers all. We do thank everyone for watching and listening today. Please, if you're in the LA area in June, go check out Quicksand with Heather Fink. And as Susie said, we can't wait to see it.
Cannot wait.
And like, share, all those good things. Subscribe to our podcast so more people can hear it. And we will absolutely see you next time. Have
Thanks,
a great
Heather.
day.
Take care.
Thank you both so much.